there he is. There's my rooster. I'm sitting out here at the chicken coop. Out here at the Butt Crack Cycles compound, if you want to call it that. Today's episode is probably going to be pretty short and short and sweet, I guess. We're working on the Super E, the S&S Super E that's on my shovel head. Right now the bike is actually up on the work stand. I'm working on some other stuff on it, and my iron head's broken right now too. And I was working on the iron head the other day, and I was like, man, it just smells like gas in here so bad. I'd walked away, I'd come back a few hours later, I opened the doors of my shop, and I was like, this stinks. Anyways, I was working on the iron head and just looked over at the shovel and saw something dripping from it. Like I said, it was up, elevated, picked up on the bike jack. So I walked over to the shovel head and realized that this thing was overflowing gas out of the carburetor bowl vent. I had left the petcock on, which I do a lot because I'm kind of forgetful. And so while I understand the simple solution here is just remember to turn the petcock off every time you park the bike, I know I'm not going to remember to do that, and I also think that's kind of a band-aid. It's not actually fixing the real problem. So we're going to pull the carburetor off and see what's going on. Usually on a Super E, if you have it overflowing fuel when parked, one of three things is going wrong. Either the float level is set too high, you've got trash in the needle and seat, or just the needle and seat has too much wear on it and it just needs to be replaced. I guess it could be possible too that your float is sinking and never actually closing the needle and seat as well. So we're going to walk inside the shop, and I'm going to pull the carburetor off. We'll set it on the workbench, take it apart, and see what we need to do to fix it. Thank you, Chompy. All right. First things first, carb's got to come off, which means got to pull the air cleaner off and then pull the carburetor off. And you could probably leave the air cleaner backing plate on. I'm gonna go ahead and yank it off, just to have a little bit more space to work with. Not that it really matters. Really, the whole reason I did that, you might not be able to see it from that angle, is to be able to get to the fuel inlet fitting, where the fuel line from the petcock goes to. Boop. Make sure you turn your petcock off too. Mine's off now. Obviously it wasn't the other day, but yeah. Now just go over to the other side and undo the 2 bolts for the carburetor to the manifold and also to the support bracket. This carburetor has a support bracket that goes down to the engine case. If you're running a Super E or any carburetor on any Harley without a support bracket, change that. You need to have a support bracket of some kind. You can't just let these carburetors hang off the end of the intake, because you will destroy the intake seals in like no time flat. Alright, that's a carburetor off of the manifold, and get your throttle cable loose. I'm actually, it's dripping on me. I'm going to try and keep the fuel in this because I want to try and I'm going to crack our bowl drain on this over a clean thing and just see how much trash comes out of it. Maybe I might just pull the bowl off and dump it. Either way. Okay, carburetor's on the workbench. Probably, oh geez, puking fuel out kind of everywhere. Maybe we'll just do this. I was going to pull the bowl out, or the bowl vent, but looks like I can just shake this thing until something comes loose and it pukes its guts. Yeah, look at all that. That is nasty. This carburetor is just full of junk, which means these fuel tanks are probably full of trash again. This is not the first time I have experienced this on this bike. Right, so there's our bowl. You can see there's definitely some stuff in the bottom of it. See it on my finger there. I am gonna pull this float and the needle and seat out, and we're gonna check a couple of things. I bet you anything there's some trash underneath this needle and seat. Very seriously doubt this is going to come through well on camera, but here in the seat, which is your inlet valve, or your inlet, essentially, you can see there's some trash in there and it looks pretty grungy. I actually think I've got another one of these. I think I have an extra needle and seat for a Super E in my carburetor drawer, so let's open that up and see what we can find. Okay, so I was able to find a new inlet fitting, so that's our seat. Found a new needle. I have an entire drawer in my workbench that's just nothing but carburetor kits and gasket sets and carburetor spare parts. And I rummaged this up out of a Harley set, or maybe it was Autolite or Motorcraft, doesn't really matter. A little cardboard float height gauge, which we will use in just a minute, but I'm going to throw this back in here and we'll set the float height. So our float and needle and seat and all is back in, and the next thing we're going to do is measure the float height. So what you do on one of these is just gently push. See, I'm pushing down right there on the needle. It raises the float. And then we're going to measure over here directly across from the pivot point is where you want to measure. And your float height needs to be an 1/8 of an inch to 3/16 of an inch down from the gasket mating surface. So take your measurer and put it right there. I'm going to pull this off camera real quick so I can actually get an eyeball on it. It's hard to do from the angle that I'm at. See if I can get that turned, if y'all can see it on the camera. This ruler is calibrated in 30/2 of an inch, and so we're right about between 5 and 6 30-seconds. So 6 30-seconds is 3/16 of an inch. 5 30-seconds is a little smaller than that, obviously, so we're good. We're going to leave that alone. That's probably an okay float height setting. Last but not least, when you're putting one of these back together, there's an O-ring that goes right here. Do not leave it off. They're really easy to forget. They're really easy to fall and get dropped on your workbench. Mine stayed in the carburetor body, so, whoops, can't see that, can you? Mine stayed in the carburetor body right there, so I'm going to put it together and just leave it in the body. But don't forget that. That's really easy to forget. A lot of people forget that. Okay, so we got the carburetor back on, and I just left the air cleaner off for now. And instead of looping our vent line, you know, nice and neat and down off into the abyss, we're going to leave it hanging out here, and I've got a old oil jug cut open sitting underneath it. I'm just going to let this sit like overnight, and we'll walk back out here in the morning and see, you know, is it full of fuel or not? Obviously, we're going to let this sit overnight with the petcock on, and that'll be our little test here. So, yeah, that's it for the day. We're going to flip the petcock on, and I'm going to go wash up, go pick Kenny up from school, and we'll check this in the morning. It's the next morning, and here we go. Let's see what we get. Oh, yeah, look at that. High and dry, baby. Fantastic. There's maybe a teeny tiny, the camera won't focus. There's maybe a teeny tiny bit of wetness on the bottom of that. Like maybe it dripped one itty bitty drop. Smell it, yeah, that smells like gas, but that might also just be some residual. But yeah, we look down there in our makeshift drain pan, and it's dry. So I would say that's a win. I'm going to actually set the camera up on a tripod, and we'll go outside and wrap this episode up. I've got a couple of thoughts and just kind of want to talk and finish this episode. So let's do that. All right, so before we close this video out, you can sometimes recondition one of these seats, if you take, this is just a stick, I'm using it as an example, but take a little wooden dowel rod and you can run it in a pencil sharpener to have like a, you know, point on it, and put just a tiny bit of lapping compound in it, and you can run it down in the hole and sort of relap that hole, the seat where the needle drops into. I didn't bother doing it with this because I didn't feel like tracking down the right size dowel rod and going through all that work when I literally had a brand new one already sitting, you know, in a drawer. So this was something that I didn't do simply because it's so much faster to just put a new piece in. Also, the hole in this seat, in this inlet fitting, is very slightly oblonged. I guess just from over the years of the needle and seat opening and then closing on it over and over and over again. This is brass, so it's fairly soft. Regardless, you can sort of refurb one of these if you're in a pinch. I've never really had good luck with it, but I just figured I'd throw that out there. That is a sort of an old-timer tip or trick. That wraps this episode up then. Like I said, this was going to be a short and sweet episode. Not really too much going on here. Just a little quick project that I could knock out on the bike to make the bike better while it's sitting there on the work stand, and I'm waiting on parts for all of the other work that I'm doing to it. But I did want to take a quick second and talk about the condition of the inside of those tanks. I took a bright light and shined it down in the tanks. This is almost impossible to get on camera, at least with my camera it is. And the tanks actually look fine inside. They look pretty good. I'm wondering, did I just get into some bad gas? I'm generally, when I'm buying gas for these bikes, I'm not buying it at big, high volume gas stations. I live, you know, somewhere fairly rural, and if y'all watch my videos and watch videos where I go ride around, I'm often riding off, you know, out through the countryside and such. And so I'm stopping at little small mom and pops gas stations. Who knows how old the tanks are, who knows how clean their fuel system is, and the fuel probably sits a lot longer than it would if it was at, you know, a big truck stop or something right off the interstate. Maybe I need to do a better job of keeping track of what station I'm filling up at, and that way if I've filled up 2 or 3 times at the same station, then now all of a sudden there's all sorts of trash in my fuel, and I can just be like, oh, maybe we're not getting gas there anymore. Chompy agrees. One last little thought here before we go. I think this is a good episode to show just sort of the duality of owning an older bike, that sort of double-edged sword. On the one hand, carburetor is really simple, and you can fix it yourself pretty cheaply at home without having to hook up a laptop to it and, you know, check all these sensors and blah, 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 like you would on a fuel-injected bike. On the other hand, carburetors can sometimes be sort of picky and finicky and a pain in the butt, but, you know, you pick your battles and you fight them, and that's really what owning an old bike is about. It's just understanding that, you know, these are not something you can just jump on and go ride all day, every day with zero maintenance, and that's fine. Yeah, I think that's probably where I'm going to close this episode out. I hope you all have enjoyed watching it. I'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.